You can call Walter C. Dornez a sidekick or just a man gone rogue. His motivations in Hellsing have always been vague. As we are introduced to the entire Hellsing chain of command in the show, Walter becomes the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle that you can't figure out until you reach the end. It always completes the picture, but the difference here is Walter is the last piece of Millennium's pick. Millennium has been staging an eternal war, but this eternal war wouldn't be possible without having a mole in the Hellsing organ. And what better way to place a mole than to turn Sir Integra's personal butler into a traitor? For most of Hellsing, Walter always appears as a loyal butler, friend, and counselor on all matters of importance to Sir Integra. He's been serving the Hellsing family since Sir Arthur's days and has carved an infamous niche for himself, yet at the end of the story he ends up betraying everything he stood for just to satisfy a misplaced grudge. Who is Walter C. Dornez? Where did he come from? How did he become associated with Hellsing? Walter's story is spread all over the Hellsing timeline. It goes back to the humble early days of the Millennium organization. Call it a coincidence or just fate waiting to play out, Walter's first canonical appearance happens alongside Alucard when they storm the Millennium base in Warsaw. However, there are multiple instances that will tell you that Walter has been associated with the Hellsing family since his childhood. Walter was educated in Oxford for political studies and philosophy under the patronage of the Hellsing family. As a 14-year-old, Walter stormed the Warsaw camp of Millennium with his aforementioned vampiric partner. He enjoyed killing every Nazi soldier he came across, despite once again being a 14-year-old boy. If you try to put two and two together, it all implies that the Hellsing family has looked after Walter since his childhood. A 14-year-old boy storming a Nazi camp without fear and killing everyone in his sight? Walter was definitely trained for this job. Walter's upbringing and lifelong loyalty to the Hellsing family has all the hallmarks of the Spy Kid character. A Spy Kid is usually part of a dangerous and influential intelligence family, yet this Spy Kid is somehow apart from them. You can't really point out the exact circumstances that led to a Spy Kid becoming part of this family, but for all intents and purposes, he has been trained to be a warrior and a spy for this family and its interests. Walter is not linked to the Hellsing family by blood, but he has played the role of the Hellsing family's Spy Kid all the way up to the present-day storyline. What role did Walter have in the Hellsing organization during his youth? Why was he called the Angel of Death? As we stated above, it's safe to assume that Walter had joined the Hellsing family since his childhood. He's been nurtured and trained in all the essentials he'd need to protect the Hellsing family against harm from monsters. Yet, investigating Walter's younger teenage days gives us more insight into the conflicting moral character he holds in the Hellsing organization. Young Walter and the butler we see in the present-day conflicts of the Hellsing series are two very different characters. Let's take a closer look at how young Walt was comparatively more brutal and lacked any shred of sympathy in battle through the classic case of his teenage adventures with Alucard. The younger version of Walter is shown to be a ruthless assassin who enjoys his bloodthirsty battles. Unlike the old butler Walter, his younger self enjoyed every kill and found a sense of pride in overpowering his enemies. An instance that appears briefly in the series shows the Millennium base raid in Warsaw and Walter's annoyance at the fact that the Major wasn't really scared of him. He had killed numerous soldiers of the Millennium, but the Major hadn't flinched, not even a bit. His brief moment of annoyance also shows you his desire to kill is motivated by a need to prove his superior strength. Young Walter always basked in the morbid glory of the bloodbaths he caused. He often insulted and taunted his victims for their inferior strength. He had a sadistic love for killing and fighting. That's how he gained his infamous nickname, Angel of Death. Everyone knew that Walter had the ability to precisely and mercilessly kill his enemies. He could inflict the most brutal versions of pain. Nobody could be as method-driven and precise as Walter was in his teenage days. The younger version had a short temper and was often out looking for a fight at any given opportunity. Combine short temper, sadism, and a foul mouth, and you're looking at one rather angsty Angel of Death. Young Walt also garnered fame for having no respect for his enemies and a compromised moral code while in battle. His disgust for the weak only accelerated his sadistic pleasure in killing them. The only one who couldn't subdue Walter in his teenage exploits was the Major. He's the Angel of Death in the Hellsing series because he crafted a reputation that matched this name. If Walter takes a life, he ensures that he enjoys doing it, just as much as an Angel of Death would do every single time. When did Walter retire from active duty and why? Is he still as deadly as his heyday? Following the end of the Warsaw camp attack by a young Walter and Alucard, the Millennium threat was believed to be extinct. It was believed for the longest time by both Walter and Alucard that the Millennium organization had been wiped from planet Earth. While the storyline switches right to the current conflict, we witness an aged and 69-year-old calmer version of Walter. For the Hellsing family and organization, Walter now plays the role of their butler, family retainer, and a a bodyguard for Sir Integra. But Walter's involvement is not limited to the Hellsing organization. He has now become a key counselor to Sir Integra, even though he is a butler for the family. This is simply because over the years, Walter has amassed a vast array of knowledge, ranging from being a tactical expert, an inventor, a weapons pioneer, and also the organizational point of contact for all major Hellsing affairs. Sir Integra trusts him, and he mostly appears as a wise man who has accepted the limitations of his age. But don't let that fool you. Underneath the exterior of a wise old man, Walter is still pretty strong, if not as arrogantly ruthless about enjoying murder like in his heyday. Walter fights with improved skill now, and he's got more than bloodthirsty sadism driving his microfilament wires. He aids Cerys with not just her 2 Halkonen guns, but also helps her out every time the crossfire gets a bit too heavy in a fight. His strength, agility, and precision haven't aged a bit, even though he's close to 69 years old. This is a major highlight of Walter's age not making a major difference to his skills and strengths, physical or mental. He often helps Sir Integra and Cerys Victoria make difficult choices when Alucard kills innocent humans just to complete his missions. As we already know, Walter is also the inventor of Alucard's dreaded Jackal and Castle gun, but Walter still carries every bit of his teenage-bred jealousy for Alucard. It's made obvious that he had planted an explosive in Alucard's gun at the end of the series. If we overlook Walter's act of betraying the Hellsing organization, he pretty much ticks off all the boxes of being the in-house Alfred to the Hellsing family. A butler you can trust and also completely rely on to help you find the most inventive solution at the spur of the moment, though that's rendered pointless by him towards the conclusion of Hellsing. We'll get into the reasons for it in the next section. When did Walter betray Hellsing, and why did he do it? The circumstances pertaining to Walter's betrayal are always kept murky, but there are hints and clues that are peppered throughout the series when Walter seemingly commits minor mistakes. To the characters in the story, these mistakes feel like human error, but Walter's ultimate betrayal always feels clear as day as we unravel the events of both the past and the present. The most important indicator of this is the fact that Walter's jealousy for Alucard and his insecurities always remind him about being the second best in Hellsing. This insecurity never leaves him. He may act as a wise old butler, but underneath the exterior of wisdom, his deep-seated desire to fight Alucard to the death only poisons him with his aid. As we discussed before, it all stems from his insecurity about being used as the second best monster killer in Hellsing. Imagine working in a vampire hunting organization, being called their Angel of Death, a ruthless and incredibly precise assassin, but with the condition that Walter work alongside an insanely powerful and immortal true vampire like Alucard. It just adds salt to the wounds on Walter's pride. Not to mention, it feels extremely contradictory to Hellsing's own mission statement, and a person indoctrinated in the same since childhood like Walter would always come back to it no matter how hard he tried to escape. There's also a hint of possessiveness as we watch the story unfold. Walter as the butler keeps losing his objectivity as he grows closer to Cerys Victoria. As for Sir Integra, he's already close to her. But for both these women, the distinction of superiority is always quite plain. Cerys Victoria is bound to Alucard through her vampiric nature, and that simply tells you her allegiances will always lean towards her master Alucard over Walter. As for Sir Integra, it's more about the practicality of using Alucard as her chief weapon. By every single mark, Alucard as a vampire outclasses Walter's old human form, and therefore, in Sir Integra's case, she might deeply respect both these Hellsing killing machines. But when you look at firepower, you can't really blame her if a duty-bound Sir Integra would consider Alucard as her first choice for a powerful killer amongst the two. Yet Walter takes it too personally, and hence he loses his objectivity. Or perhaps it was never about any objectivity at all, but just being the most powerful man in the room. The truth hides in plain sight, but eventually comes to light when Walter states that he chose to switch sides to Millennium out of his own free will. Underneath all his loyalty, seeing out his true boyish grudge against Alucard was always what he wanted. Fighting Alucard to the death is a desire that he kept alive for years. That the Major's goals matched his, as minimal as the extent might have been, an offer to join Millennium was just an open invitation for Walter when you think of things from his perspective. We could also speculate about some extremely convenient coincidences that occur throughout the show. Walter conveniently goes missing right at the moment young Integra is being hunted through the Hellsing Manor. Walter was entrusted with young Integra's safety by Sir Arthur Van Helsing before his death, yet he's nowhere around to protect her. Perhaps it could also be a deliberate attempt on Walter's part to force young Integra into desperation so that she'd have no other option than running into Alucard's dungeon. Why would he want that? Simply because bloodshed in Alucard's resting place would be enough to wake him up. This would ensure that Walter got the opportunity to go head-to-head with him someday. In the real-time events of Hellsing, the Major swiftly gives way to Walter's betrayal when he encounters him from the Hindenburg II. While escorting Sir Integra, Sir Shelby Penwood, and other human soldiers safely to the Hellsing Manor, they're ambushed by the captain. Walter chose to stay and fight the captain by stalling to help Sir Integra and the others reach Hellsing Manor. Yet, what we see next is a brief fight between Walter and his second archenemy, the captain. Soon, we see the Major interrupting this fight. He greets Walter by saying that 55 years ago it was decided that Walter would join Millennium. It's pretty evident here that even if Walter is showing his complete loyalty to the Hellsing organization, his betrayal was always planned to happen. And all of it was to fight Alucard to the death. Walter can try to rationalize his insecurities by stating that defeating Alucard is more about principle, just like Father Anderson has his reasons to chase Alucard. The noble crust of his motivation could be that he just doesn't want a monster to be the ruling firepower of Hellsing. It doesn't really change the fact that his deepest desire to defeat Alucard is to prove his superiority, and his move to betray Hellsing is nothing but his lifelong teenage grudge, getting a chance to fight Alucard until one of them die. Was Walter better in Hellsing 2001? Perhaps we can credit Walter from the OVA for accepting his failure and finding closure for himself in the end. If we compare Walter from Hellsing 2001 with Walter from the OVA, they're remarkably different characters. Both might ultimately lose themselves, yet there's some dignity about accepting the truth rather than living in delusion. When we watch the end of Walter's story in the OVA with his artificial vampiric form, he has a sense of regret and acceptance for all the people he lost by the end of the series. On the other hand, we see Walter basically cosplaying as Alfred the Butler in Hellsing 2001. Throughout Hellsing 2001, Walter remains undyingly loyal to the Hellsing organization, even going so far as to commit himself to going down with the ship when he tries to save Integra from a crashing helicopter. From beginning to end, he's a mentor to Ceres, a friend to Alucard, and a loyal servant to Integra through and through. But the difference between the 69-year-old Walter and the artificial vampire version is that Walter finds a sense of closure in his artificial vampire form. Hellsing 2001 ends sort of abruptly. Instead of Millennium, Alucard and co fight an overseas true vampire called Incognito, who manages to expose the Hellsing organization and get them branded as terrorists. In the end, it isn't even overtly confirmed to us if Walter survives the aforementioned air crash, and the series ends with title cards telling us what happened after Incognito's attack on London. The OVA Walter gets his teenage wish to die on his own terms. This is captured beautifully with Walter's de-aging fact. The more he loses to Alucard, the younger he becomes. This perhaps might be Kota Hirano's implicit way of telling us that it was the boy in Walter that always wanted to live in his most brutal form. The butler we saw was perhaps never the real Walter. His final defeat and acceptance makes him realize that his death match with Alucard was futile. He lost the people he cared for the most in the end, Sir Integra and Ceres Victoria. This is a mark of evolution when you consider everything that leads up to his transformation into an artificial vampire. Losing the respect of Ceres Victoria and Sir Integra might be a regret in Walter's final moments, but in a deeper level, Walter is really himself in the. He also repents for everything before going down to meet his death. Very rarely do ruthless sadists even have an ounce of regret and repentance. Walter's final form in the Hellsing OVA is a moment of character evolution that's saved as one of the highlights of his character and the series. It is a tragedy in the highest form. Compared to that, Alfred Walter is kinda boring. We know, we just had to say it. Loyalty to Integra through and through is his most admirable trait, but it's also the very thing that keeps him within that stereotypical super butler role. In Hellsing Ultimate, Walter's character is far more dynamic, which is why we'd say from a morality standpoint, Walter 2001's the champ, but overall, OVA Walter is far more interesting. Marvelous verdict! Like every other marvelous character in Hellsing, Walter deserves a marvelous verdict. Walter is a character that you'll never see coming, and that's precisely why he's the linchpin of the Hellsing storyline. Apart from Alucard, Walter is perhaps the only known Hellsing link to the Millennium Organization and its grand conspiracy. He's playing both sides and could be useful to either, but Kota Hirano does a marvelous job of gluing together the past and the present with one single character, the ace in the hole and the mole hiding in plain sight. That's Walter C. Dornez. So, until the next marvelous video drops, check out our other Hellsing-related videos, or maybe figure out exactly how Ceres fights monsters without an arm. We'd love to learn more about that. Either way, all your answers can be found on Marvelous Anime.